Welcome to Time to Unpack Talk Show. I am your host, Tiffany Singleton. Today we have with us a trauma therapist, Miss Christian Jackson, here to discuss her book, Daddy Issues. Welcome to the show, Christian.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you.
Good, I'm glad.
Okay, so let's jump right in because I'm so excited about all of the content and information that the book talks about. So let's talk a little bit about daddy issues. What, for those who might not be sure what that is, what are daddy issues?
Yes, so first of all, it's a very triggering term, right? And so daddy issues is something that I felt was put on my heart probably about 5 or 6 years ago. I've always known I wanted to write a book. I knew I wanted to make change. And so during the time that I was being triggered, frankly, by my own clients, I was like, we're in session and we can't make the session about us. Right. So I can't do that. But I would be in session with these women. When you first meet a therapist, we do our biopsychosocial assessment. And that's what we get all in your business, right? So I ask you about your family history, your medical history, and all those things. And of course, we're going to ask about how your family of origin, the people who raised you, your village, how they impact who you are, your values, the way you see the world. And then I'm asking also about your social history.
Yes.
So what's your dating life like? Who do you date? Why do you date them? How have your relationships been? How are they healthy or unhealthy? And so consistently, I just kept hearing all these tragic stories from their relationships and why they're coming to therapy and why they were so entangled upon, with these people that they were dating. Their identities were so enthralled with them, or they just didn't know who they were in the first place. And a lot of it came back to the messages that they were receiving from their dads. Now, at the time, I think I was super sensitive because my personal story, even to this day, is that my father and I are not speaking. And so we would go through ebbs and flows of our relationship where we would just go at it. We're a lot alike in a lot of ways. I think that might be part of it. So when I would ask these women about their question, or ask questions to these women about their relationships, and we always got back to their dad, I would want to sit there and be like, oh, me too. Oh, my God, But I couldn't do that, because, again, I have to kind of hold a certain space for my clients in the room. And so that's when I went to therapy for the first time. That was probably back in 2016 that I started going. I was planning a wedding. I was pregnant planning a wedding. And so my husband would trigger me for my daddy issues. And I didn't have a name for it at the time, but I kept hearing this is a thing. We got to talk about the father wound. And so out of therapy, you know how we do as counselors, we're assigned that homework that says you need to write a letter to your daddy. I was like, oh, I don't want to do that, I don't want to, because that's very personal work. I don't want to write a letter to my dad, and I'm sitting here on the journal, crying and all of that, because it really did tap into a very personal piece of things that I was pretending I didn't know. I was ignoring a lot of things. I was avoiding a lot of stuff that was showing up in my marriage. My husband and I we've been together now 16, 15 years or so, and we already had our 5-year-old. So it was showing up for me as a mother, who I thought I was and the lack of confidence I had, or me trying to compensate for the things my dad didn't give me. And so a lot of the journal entries just turned into my book. The way that I write is very, I have to compartmentalize things. So in the beginning, I'm telling you what daddy issues are. And that's just according to Christian Jackson, my experience, but also the experiences of the women that I serve. And so daddy issues is based on a clinical diagnosis, 2 of them: separation anxiety and reactive attachment disorder. So a lot of what I was seeing is the very excessive worrying that your body remembers, that your mind remembers, and your mind is racing about who you are, and you are literally a different person and just not okay if you were separated from a significant person. In this case, your dad. And so reactive attachment disorder is usually given to kids who are in the foster care system. They don't have a lot of trust. And so that's another issue with authority. So for people who are dealing with the combination of those symptoms, there are abandonment issues, rejection, trust issues, your identity. For me, identity was a huge piece. And I tell my personal story in the book so that you can kind of see how I just really was not on solid ground. I didn't know who I was because of what my dad and I were going through at the time. There was a paternity issue. That's the story. So that's why a lot of it was, I don't know who I am. And I'm going to this doctor's office and I'm carrying children and I don't know my medical history. And that was stripped from me because I thought I knew who I was. But then now I'm being told a different story. Once I define what daddy issues are according to me, then the rest of the book I hit the ground running, really, because I want you to know, and I want people out there who are reading my books, and the feedback I've gotten is that we got to name the thing before we can fix it.
That's good.
Period, right?
That's good.
You're not going to be able to make any progress unless you can say, okay, this is my abandonment issue. These are my trust issues. I really feel rejected in this moment. I don't feel seen. I don't feel heard, right? And a lot of that, of course, can go back to mommy issues. Of course, it could be grandma issues, whatever you want to call it, but in this case, it's a personal, near and dear movement of mine, the daddy issues movement, because women who are, the term itself, daddy issues, is very stigmatizing. There's so much shame and guilt tied to what daddy issues are. So my goal is to help do my part to destigmatize, first of all, mental health issues, this very specific daddy issues piece where women are just looked at as like sluts and whores and they just like old men when really you don't know her story.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? And so I'm hoping to get a little of a pushback when you see even the title is daddy issues, right? Yeah. So this is the book and her sister. Daddy issues, but the tagline, how to detangle from the sins of our fathers, there's a generational piece here, right? So part of my healing process and the way that I was able to forgive my dad and not sit here thinking that I'm not going to be okay unless my dad apologizes. Like that was holding me in prison, right? So I had to let go, and that's a whole process in itself. But part of that was me empathizing. There are people in our lives, daddy, mommy, whoever, who we are holding to a certain standard where or an expectation, and they can't feel that because they didn't get the things that they needed.
That's good.
Period. Right. I listened to a sermon last week, Pastor Stephen Furtick at Elevation Church, and he was talking about how there was a battle that I think Saul was going into, Jonathan, somebody. Don't quote me. But the point was they didn't have the weapons to go into and fight, but they moved toward it with faith, right? He was talking about how they didn't have blacksmiths enough for all the warriors to have weapons. So there are some people who just don't have the tools.
The tools.
Period. And so the better we can understand that, the more empathy we have for the other person, the more compassion. So I wrote this book out of compassion. I don't talk about my dad's story because that's his to tell. It's not fair for me to do that. I talk about my experiences after him and like how I conceptualize things, but I have mommy issues too. There are things. My mom and I are still talking and very close. She's actually at my house right now with my boys while I'm here. But the point was that I took this pain and used it because I am one of many women who are dealing with this issue. And I want us to be able to talk about it. There are survivors of all kinds of trauma who don't come out because they don't think that they are going to be heard or believed. And so I am here to give language to women. And frankly, I've had some guy friends, some males hit me up and they're reading my book and they're like, yo, this is me too, Right. So I'm trying to give voice so that if someone, maybe you don't call it daddy issues, maybe you just call it like everything I've named and categorized for you. But the point is you have language to be able to say, this is what I'm dealing with. And this is what I can take to my friend, my trusted, safe person, my counselor, my life coach, whatever it is. I can name this because Christians put it all here for me, And every chapter, even after, is where I you know what it is. So now you know how daddy issues looks up like in your friendships, your marriages, as a mother. Like I wrote a chapter about motherhood and as an employee. In between each chapter, you get a chance to put into practice activities and reflection questions that I have for you because you're going to be triggered as you read the book. So if you do get the book, guys, please pace yourself. And that's what I always recommend because it was triggering for me to write. And so I want you to be able to take care of yourself as a therapist. I need to make sure that I'm doing that for you, is giving you tools. The very first chapter out the gate, the beginning and the end of the book, you get a chance to do a self-care assessment. So you get to measure how well am I actually taking care of my mind, body, soul.
Right.
And speaking of soul, there's a chapter, Heavenly Father versus Earthly Father, that I wrote, which is a whole different thing.
Okay, and you said something earlier that's going to lead us to our next question. So even in relationships and we find ourselves becoming involved with people, how do daddy issues lead us to attracting and being attracted to our mate?
Yes, that's a great question. I get asked that all the time. I get asked that all the time, especially when we're talking about why are we attracting the same trifling people? Or why am I in these relationships over and over again? Do I date my dad?
Yes.
Right? A lot of that is because the daddy issues equals emotional trauma. Trauma is so powerful in itself. Trauma meaning a significant event, whatever that thing is, and you name that. It's so significant that it changes the way that you even look at the world.
Wow. Yeah.
So if I got in a car accident, from now on, if I learned right then at that time, I am not safe. My body remembers I'm not safe. So whatever it is that comes and makes you feel like the car, the perceived threat, or the actual threat, your body is going to respond. Your mind is going to go haywire, adrenaline's flowing, cortisol, the stress hormones going, the amygdala's going off. And these are the parts of the brain, the nerdy parts about trauma I know about and how I used to treat people, because we have to know how our bodies respond to trauma. So if we're thinking developmentally where we are when we experience trauma, let's say daddy left when you were 5, or maybe daddy wasn't present or consistent when you were growing up, and all you know is that you are a kid and you want this man or this person to keep you safe and be there, but it's push and pull. So what you're associating now with relationships or trusting or consistency is that it doesn't stay. So now you develop a certain attachment style, which is also a chapter in my book, because we can't talk about daddy issues or mommy issues without understanding attachment. And attachment theory is, it's just the idea that it's helping us understand why we show up the way we do in relationships. So why am I so distrustful of men or of my friends? Why do I build walls instead of just a healthy boundary, right? Because I am literally trying to protect myself from the car accident, the actual trauma. Because my body said, I'm not going through that again, sis. Right. You know what I'm saying? So I will enter these relationships in a certain way because I want to make sure that I am protected. It's all about safety, all about self-preservation. The tricky thing is, though, because it's traumatic, we may choose the same person or attract the same men or end up in the same relationships because although we are running from that danger, we know how to navigate that.
That's right. It's familiar.
It's familiar. It's comfortable. Yes. And so there's something in us that's like, oh, I know what to do if my man hits me.
Yes.
I'll take a pill. I'll down it with this bottle of wine. I'll go to sleep. It'll be a new day tomorrow.
Right.
I know when he get home at 6, exactly what the routine is. And that's unfortunate.
That's right.
But at the same time, it's what this woman knows.
Right.
She knows she knows how to get away from that pain. And if she's treated with respect and love and adoration, it's weird. So insert self-sabotage, right? Like, this is weird. I'm being delivered flowers at work just because this is, alarms go off.
Right. Yeah.
And people are like, I don't know how to handle that. I don't like this. And that's why they'll come to me and sit on my screen because I own a virtual practice, and they'll say, I'm itching to go call my sneaky link. Like, I got to go call bruh, and I'm like, sis, why is this? Why is this? Like, let's sit with what this is. It's because your body's not used to being respected. Or as people would say, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Right.
When everything's okay. Like, why are you tripping? This is what God wanted for you. Mm-hmm. This is the relationship that he said he wanted for you when he built you in your mother's womb. Like, why are you running? Mm-hmm. It's so many caveats, but if I could summarize it, a lot of why we trip up is because the way trauma has helped us shape our world, healthy or not, whatever it looks like. It's mostly going to be unhealthy, though.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll find that it just seems like you might get out of a relationship with one person that was toxic or just absolutely crazy.
Right.
But then you find that you end up in the same crazy arms, but just with a different face.
Different face.
But at the same time, you're not even realizing your pattern of relationship. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the patterns.
Yes.
Why do we choose? Why do women choose that person over and over? And I guess it ties back to what you just said. It's normal for me.
It is normal for us. And so if it's normal, if it's comfortable, it's familiar, again, I know how to navigate that. I don't care how unhealthy it is. That's what I know.
Yeah.
I am refusing to go the other way or do something different because, frankly, I don't have the tools.
Right.
I don't know what to do if this is a safe, healthy thing.
Yes.
So it's also, do I trust myself? Do I trust myself to be in this relationship and not screw it up? Oh, Christian, I just know I'm about to mess this up. I don't know how to not talk crazy to my man. And, we got to go through that in therapy too, because it's like, and I'd say you can't run from yourself.
That's right.
We be trying. We try to run from ourselves. But if you go from one job to the next, one friend group to the next, and you find the patterns even there, one relationship to the next, whatever it's going to look like, you're going to take you with you. So the patterns, it comes with self-awareness. We have to be able to understand, am I doing the same thing? Why am I doing the same thing? And not judge ourselves for it, because a lot of what we get tripped up on is the guilt.
Right.
I did something bad. Oh, I must be so stupid and crazy for being in this thing over and over and over again. And really what it comes down to is we're not understanding the mechanisms behind that. This is trauma, right? If it's emotional relationship trauma, which is how I support women in my practice, then what that looks like is just stop judging yourself. You're doing what your body is made to do. You have been through a traumatic experience, whatever that looks like, and you were trying to stay safe. So even you staying in this pattern is you just keeping yourself alive. So how can we find a different way to protect yourself? That's the solution. That's the how-to, if you will. So like in my books or my content, my groups and my online courses and stuff, I'm talking about the how. Right. Because identifying the pattern is the first thing. That's right. So then it's like, what do we do next? We have to break the cycle. And some of that looks like changing your friend group, changing your outlook, what's your heart posture, who do you identify with and how. A lot of that kind of ties back to even my personal story with God. I was running from him for a long time. I was really mad at him for a while. And so my therapist at the time told me that I could not have a healthy relationship with God or trust God because it was being interrupted or clouded by the relationship with my earthly father. That was mind-blowing for me. I was like, oh, crap, this is a breakthrough session. I had never thought about that. And so that's where that chapter of my book comes from, is like really, again, it comes from self-awareness.
Yes.
And there's a pattern of me running, and I had to stop and say, Christian, God is not your dad.
Right.
Insert your dad name. God is not the person who hurt you. And so that pattern comes from not even recognizing those things, excuse me, or just slowing down long enough to see what that pattern is.
Mm-hmm. And another important piece to that is also learned behavior.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so which can be an unrealized trauma until somebody comes into therapy to start doing the work.
Yeah.
So just for the audience purposes, we'll just insert the example of, let's say someone saw their mother getting beat or abused.
Yeah. All
of their childhood. So in their mind, that's what love looks like to them. So which will also lead to those unhealthy relationships and patterns, right? So that's stuff that you have to unlearn.
Yep.
You
have to unlearn. Yeah, because we think it's normal. As a kid, you are automatically associating love and care with, like you said, the abuse.
Yes.
And so a lot of what, we'll do in our practices, of course, is helping people to separate that definition.
Right.
Like, you don't have to deal with this. You do understand that, right? Like, this is not okay.
That's
right. You do realize this, right? And of course, so a lot of what I do also is inner child work. I'm helping people become the adult they needed as a child. Because she's sitting in here, like, Ray Ray is my inner child. I've named her, okay? I know what she looks like.
Name.
Yes. She was my maiden name. And so Ray Ray comes out, with my marriage, a lot of like 12-year-old Ray Ray pop off, when her husband talking to her a certain way.
Yeah.
Because I said I would never be in a marriage where my man talks to me like my daddy talked to my mama.
Right.
Right? And so I have to like connect with Ray Ray sometimes and be like, sis, like, your husband is not your dad. And I share a story in my book about how my husband literally told me that. It was super embarrassing. And it was part of the beginnings of me realizing, oh, I am holding on to some stuff that I need to let go.
Right.
So a lot of the work, the how-to is how to recognize the pattern of when inner child shows up. Because out of our trauma, my 5-year-old self may be driving the car.
Right.
Informing all of my decisions, that is. And so I need to connect with 5-year-old, 7-year-old self, figure out what he or she needs so that I can move forward today. That's the work I do in EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. For those who don't know, it's an amazing modality for trauma survivors to help us go back safely and evoke a flashback, basically. And a lot of that is inner child work. It's let's go back to 5-year-old self. What does she need? A lot of times we have to go back to where that trauma happened.
Right.
Because we learn out of that trauma a lot of things. And a lot of those messages don't serve us anymore. They never served us. So if I learned I'm not safe or I'm not good enough, that probably happened when you were a kid. And we are still operating with that same mindset because that's how powerful trauma can be unless we interrupt it. So that inner child piece is huge. Mm-hmm.
And I know it's a lot that we can discuss. We just don't have time for
Yes,
everything that we can
I know.
get into. But I do want you, I know it's also this buzz on social media about trauma bonding.
Oh,
Everybody's talking about trauma bonding.
Yes.
But I would like for you to address, one, what that is, what that really looks like, and then if you will end with tips on how to attract the person that we really should attract.
Oh, yes. Okay. Trauma bonding. Crap, I should have thought about this. Let me think. Because it's so complicated.
Right.
Trauma bonding is basically a theory that says that we are, it's a sense of false loyalty. Okay. I'll say that. I say false loyalty because we have developed a relationship with the person, for example, who was part of the trauma that we feel like we can't leave. So an easy way to explain this is, like we were kind of alluding to earlier, the abusive relationship.
Yes.
Unfortunately, statistics will say that it takes at least 7 times for a woman to leave an abusive relationship because she is trauma bonded. She has so many things tied to this perpetrator or the abuser. So that looks like my money is tied in there, my kids, our house, my well-being. So I have to stay.
Right.
And so trauma is telling you that you're not safe, you're not enough, you can't have anybody because that's what the person probably tells you. Nobody wants you. Right. That is the bond, that sense of false loyalty. Oh, he just gets mad and so he does A, B, and C. That is what I think really keeps us stuck if we don't realize that piece. So now your audience knows, right? You can't unhear it. You know what trauma bonding is. We got a name for it.
That's right.
And so if that is where you may be, I would suggest now let's figure out where you have control and where you don't have control. What you do have control over is your perception of where you are in a relationship. So if someone is telling you, you need me in order to then is that really true? Are you ready to lean in and challenge that? Are you ready to do something different? Now, it's a healthy thing for you to actually consider, I am enough.
Right.
But it may not feel comfortable. So one of the things that I need people to know, even when they're coming on my couch, right, at my practice, is to understand that it's not always the most comfortable thing, even if we're doing something healthy. So they'll come back and be like, Christian, you said that I needed to advocate for myself.
Right.
And so I'm like, well, I mean, I didn't say it was going to be easy.
Right.
Right? Like nothing worth having is easy. And so if we want to get over address the trauma bond, which is, again, that false sense of loyalty because your trauma brain takes over, and that's a whole different talk in itself, then how do we break that? We have to realize where the truths are. Who's around you? What are you looking at on social media that's feeding this idea that you have to stay where you are? Because you may need to switch that up. What podcast are you listening to? Book, shows? What are you taking in that keeps you stuck? And a lot of people just think that they're never going to be able to get out of it and believe that if I open up Pandora's box, I'm not going to be able to handle what comes next. And that's not fair. I mean, it's definitely a process and it's very, it has to be intentional. Which is why I have, I guess, speaking of the how to attract, I have some content myself that I write all the time, and I'm doing more and more groups these days. So you didn't even know this, but my group coming up is how to attract the right person.
That's awesome.
But
Perfect timing.
I know, right? Look how kismet that is. But it's my second time doing the group, and I had it's a virtual group I'm doing on March 12th coming up. I did it right before Valentine's Day this year. Okay. And I had 40 people registered, and we got in, and I did breakout rooms, and it's free for 2 hours. And what came out of the first time I did it was we just need more space to be able to talk about these things and say the unpopular thing. And so, like, Christian, how do I attract the right person? I used to say, before my friend told me to stop, I was like, I'm not here to help you find a man. I'm not here to do that. I want you to work on you.
Yes.
But she was like, well, Christian, if I'm scrolling through your page and I'm lonely and single, I'm trying to find a man. I'm trying to find somebody.
Yep.
So, if that's the goal, then sure, but
Right.
it's for me, in the how to attract the right person, obviously that's clickbait, right?
Right.
You are not here to live to try to find somebody. Belonging is definitely part of like our basic needs. But in that group, we digging in.
Yes.
Okay, we're
That's
talking
good.
about why you do create these narratives in your mind that keep you trauma bonded and what your ideal is. And is your
That's
ideal something that is keeping you stuck?
Yes.
Are you out here with high expectations, but then yet if you get there, can you handle there?
Yeah, that's it.
Are you doing the work here?
That's it.
So that is to help lead people into my course too that I have. That's actually available now. It's called Is It Me? How My Daddy Issues May Be Jacking Up My Relationships. It's an online course that I wrote and launched February 1st. And I've got some students in there. They're working through this self-paced content. We have a Facebook group that goes with it too so that I can engage with you live. All those things are at my website, and I can tell you how to find that stuff later. But I'm giving you the how, right?
Yes.
The piece is, do you want to?
Do you want? That's
Are you ready? That's
Ooh,
always
are you
the
committed
thing.
to the process?
Are you committed? That always comes up. So,
Yes.
we out here getting the lashes and the nails and the hairs and the outfits and the shoes.
But how about the inner work?
But are we paying our therapist?
Okay.
Are we? You know what I'm saying? Are we trying to
do the inner
invest in a
work.
different way?
Yes.
So how much do you value yourself?
Yes.
I submit to y'all that
Yes.
you buy your bundles, but you don't want to pay $150 for a course that
That's
really is like 6 weeks of content.
Yes.
And they're like, I don't know about that.
Yes.
All right, sis, when you book that next flight,
Yeah.
I hope you have a good time when you come back to that same thing. We're talking about patterns, right?
That's right.
So what is it that you are willing to invest in for the long term? Because you're just going to be stuck in the same cycle, and you may be comfortable there for a while, and that's fine. I'm not saying I'm the end-all, be-all to everything, because I know some dope therapists in the area that I refer to as well, with their programs and their practices and stuff like that. But it always comes down to, Christian, $147 for this course?
I know.
And yes.
Yes.
I am licensed twice and got a national certification and trauma training, and that stuff I have to pay for. So
That's
practically speaking, I have a family, but that is cheap. That is less than one session with me in session.
It really is.
So I want people to be able, I say that because in our field, a lot of people are shifting towards really placing value on what you want.
Yes.
Because I'm not trying to go get my nails done and get a fungus.
That's right.
You get what you pay for.
That's right.
So I have a lot of content. I'm live all the time on my Instagram page, and I'll have a session, and somebody will say something. I'm like, I need to address this, and I'll pop on. I just launched my new podcast. It's called Pray, Twerk, Work.
Oh, I love it.
Relationship trauma. Yeah, it's to me, it's like the 3 really essential components to healing trauma. So, you pray or connect to the God of your understanding.
Yes.
Whether it's going in nature and really connecting and slowing down. So I think a spiritual component is important to address trauma. We got to move our body. I say twerk.
Yeah.
I don't twerk anymore.
Yeah,
but, that is it's just still about body movement, and how important that is to healing trauma. And then work. Once you do these 2 pieces, you're connected and you're moving your body, you're forgiving your body, you're engaging with it, then that's when the work starts. So that's where the name comes from. But I just launched it last week. We'll see. I'm giving you the how. And a lot of it is free for me, but I'm working on placing price tags on my offerings. That's something that I'm working on still. Because I just like to give, just me. But there's always a how that people can enter into that I think are at different levels. You may not be ready for therapy, but you can buy a book, you can get a course, you can listen to a podcast. So I try to offer those things at Couch with Christian with me.
All right.
Yeah.
So we do appreciate you taking your time to come share with us today,
Thank you.
Christian. So if the audience would like to follow you or connect with you, how would they do so?
Yes, the best way is my Instagram account at Couch with Christian, all one word. And so that is where I am live a lot. I'm most active on my stories. You get to see what I like to call my educated shenanigans. So Facebook is a page, same name, at Couch with Christian. You can follow my Facebook page. My podcast is Pray, Twerk, Work, Healing Relationship Trauma with Christian Jackson, and that is the name of the Facebook group. And my website, couchwithchristian.com.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right. Okay, you guys follow and connect with Christian. You will be glad that you did. Christian, thank you for coming on, and we hope to see you soon.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Tiff.
All right. Bye. Bye-bye.